Welcome to Improve Your English Writing, video number 65, which is part 2 in a two-part series on tables. And specifically, we'll be covering cell formatting, table notes, horizontal and vertical lines, and large tables. If you would like to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or you think others will find it useful, please click like. And check out links to videos and books in the description, like a link to the companion volume here. So let's talk about cell formatting. So you want to use a consistent vertical and horizontal alignment within a column. So we're talking about a column. So for a single column, you need to use the same vertical and horizontal alignment. And basically, each cell is, or maybe each column is going to have the same type of data, and it's going to be numbers or it's going to be words. So let's talk about formatting numbers. So do not include a unit of measure like feet, inches in a cell when it is in the column title. So maybe going, here's my example, table that I had from the part 1. Just go to the next slide that I had prepared. So here's a unit of measure of, dollars, millions of dollars. So you don't need to put like a dollar symbol or out, here, and you don't need to put percentages here because it's already included in the column. It's already included in the column title. So you don't need to include a unit measure in the cell when it's already in the column title. And you want to center the column on the longest number. Like here, this column here in budget is $500,000. And now these light lines would not appear in the table. I did make this in Excel, and I did include the lines just so people could see the formatting. Is it centered? Is it left? Is it right? So I left these in just for clarity of example. But notice how this column here, budget, this $500,000 is the longest number, and it's centered. It's centered on this number because that's the longest number. Align numbers without a decimal point on the last digit to line up any comma separators. So basically here you want to line it on the last digit. You don't want to center the numbers. You always want to center them on the last digit. This way people could actually add up the numbers themselves if they really wanted to. This makes it much easier. So, and when you align it on the last digit, then the comma separators will all line up. So with no decimal point, you do it on the last digit. Getting back to here, align numbers with a decimal point on the decimal point. And I'm pretty sure the next little thing says use the same number of decimal places. So you can't have one number have one decimal place and the other one have two. So going back to this example, notice in this column, all these numbers are aligned on the decimal point, and they all have one decimal point. You wouldn't want to have, this one have one decimal, numbers after the decimal point, and this one have two, and this one have three, this one have one, this one have two. They all need to have the same number of decimal places, and you line it on the decimal. Continuing cell formatting with words. Basically, if you have a cell formatting, if there's no run over present in the entire column, so everything is on a single line of text, so all the text in the column is one line, basically there's no run over, so it's all one line. The text may be centered, this is the huge may be centered. Maybe it looks better, it may look better aligned left. A column of cells with long text may look better if aligned left. And of course, long text probably means more than one line. But so going back to this one, no run over. You can center it. And columns with long text may look better aligned left. Align run over to the left when a space is used between cells. But you indent the run over the width of a capital M when no space is used between cells. So if you have run over, so this is how you handle run over. Space between cells, then you line everything to the left. You run any extra lines to the left. But if you have no space between the cells, this way you can actually tell the difference between the cells, or it's clear. The run over is indented the width of a capital M. Do I have that in an example? I'll probably get to it. Oh, there it is. This is an example. So typical. So here, I know. Just pretend everything was like the first question, number one. You may center it if there's no runner in the column. So this would be center. I got ahead of myself on that slide. I think we're going to discuss this in a few bullets. So, yes, the next couple bullets here, we'll need to go back to that slide. So when a stub entry has more than one line of text, and the cell text is only one line, so stub is more than one, cell is one, you line the cell text with the stub entry's bottom line. Like I said, I'll flip back to the other to this will make sense, or I have an example of it. The other one is when the stub entry and the cell text both have more than one line of text. Align the cell text with the stub entry's top column. So here basically, this bullet just backing up. So here the cell only has one, but the stub has more than one. Then you line it with the bottom line of the stub entry. But if both cells have more than one line of text, then you align it to the stub entry's top column. So getting back to here. So this was that first bullet. So the stub entry has more than one column. So because you can actually see that here, the stub, just call this the stub. It has two. This is the first line with question 2, and this in parentheses is the second one. So the stub has more than one column, but the cell only has one line. Then you line it with the stub entry's bottom line, because here's the stub entry's bottom line. That's how you do this. Of course, you have to line everything. This shows multiple different formats, but you would have to line the entire column with the same vertical and horizontal alignment. I'm just showing you this is what happens when you have these two. You'd align it left and to the stub entry's bottom line. But when the stub entry is more than one and the cell is more than one, then when the stub entry and the cell text both have more than one line, align the text with the stub entry's top line. Notice how this text is all lined to the top of the stub entry, not to the bottom. If it was aligned to the bottom, you'd actually have a space before this, these two lines would actually be down one. But you align it with the top. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, go back and reread these rules and come back to this table here. It has a description of what to do in the different situations. But remember, you need to have a consistent format, not mix and match. Empty cells. What do you do when you have an empty cell? Well, when a cell does not apply, you just leave it blank. But when a cell applies and has no data, you place a centered M dash in the cell. If an M dash is not available, use 3 space periods, or 3 centered periods, sorry. An alternative is to use N/A for not applicable and ND for no data with the definitions in the table note. Because sometimes people may, they say this is not available, not applicable. So just because this could maybe confuse readers, I say you always define the abbreviations in the table. That way it's very clear. Do I have an example of that? Maybe in the first one. I do have this centered M dash in A here, just as an example in this table. What about table notes? Well, a table has there's 4 different types of notes in a table. There's a source note. There's what's called a general note. There's a footnote, and there's probability notes. So you may not have all 4 of these. You're not going to, you're not always going to have all 4. These are the 4 possible different types. So spacing and run over with notes. This applies to all notes. Use a space between notes and footnotes. And you align any run over to the left. Notice here. So notice how there's a space between these notes and footnotes. And here you actually have, here's some run over here. Actually under note here, you have some run over. It's a line left. And here on note B, you have some run over, which is a line left. First type is the source note. So basically, when the table data is not from the author, you need to cite all the sources of the data in a citation format. Now, I do have future videos on source citation, so I'm not going to cover that here, but you basically need to document all your sources when they're not from the author. Use source or sources, depending if you have one or more. And it occurs in italics, and it's followed by the sources in order of appearance, whether from top to bottom or left to right. Most tables are not going to have 15 sources, so you need to has it occur top to bottom or left to right. And then some examples. Here's a source note. The data source is not from the author in a source citation format. I believe if I go here, this is just a source. Now this is probably not a proper source, but I just threw one in here. So this would be like a source citation right here, source. So the data is not from the author, but they're telling you where they got the data from. So you need to put that source in a source citation format. Do not use this as an example of source citation format. It's pretty close to probably an actual one. Continuing notes, a general note. So notes or abbreviations applying to the entire table follow the source note. Use note in italics followed by the table-wide notes and then by the abbreviations. So basically, note, then it's table-wide notes, and then abbreviations. Of course, if you don't have any table-wide notes and you have abbreviations, then it's just note, and then you can list the abbreviations, right? So that's how that occur. Now, APA format. The APA format actually combines the source note and the general note into a single note. So it uses note with a period here, and the note is in italics, followed by the general note information, and then by the source note information. Just so you know, so it does not have source and then note. It just has note with the combined information. Footnotes. So maybe just go back to so like here's the source note, then here's the note. The note applies to the entire table. Any source or note run over is aligned to the left margin. So a footnote, and these are some examples of footnotes right here. There's A, B, C, and D. A footnote may apply to a row, a column, a spanner, or a specific cell. So just coming back to here, so I have some notes here, like here this note A is actually applying to this to the spanner, so to these 2 columns. This note B is actually just applying to this column. This note C right here is actually applying to this row of data. And this note D right here is actually this applying to this cell of data. I think it says that in these here. So use superscript letters in the table and in the notes section to avoid confusion with any superscript numbers in the running text. Basically, we use number for footnotes in the running text, so to avoid confusion, we use superscript letters in the table and in the notes section. So notice how these are superscript letters here in the table, and they're also superscript down here in the footnote. And you order the footnotes from top to bottom and left to right. Basically, it's almost like reading. So you go from top to bottom, left to right. So it's almost like if you were, if this were a page of words. So, line 1. And here's the next. Oh, we put this one in. We just keep going across and down, across and then down. And so that's how we got B. But you kept going down, you go down and then across. That's how we got to C, and that's why, hopefully this makes sense. This is why this one is D. Those you go top to bottom and then left to right. Unlike running note footnotes, which only can apply once and you have to maybe repeat them, a table footnote may apply to one or more table elements. So if you came back here and for some reason this note D applied to this 30 over here, you'd write a D over here. You couldn't do that. You don't do that in normal running text if you don't know. We'll get to that in a future video. But basically, if this footnote B applied to this column over here, this fourth column, you would write a B over here. So you can, wherever it applies, you can use the footnote. It could apply to the column or maybe to a row. So they can be used. So basically, the footnotes can be reused or applied to more than one table element. Probability notes. I don't know, depending on what field you're in, you're probably never going to have probability notes, or you're going to have probability notes, but just want to cover it. Basically, a probability note shows the results of statistical hypothesis testing using asterisks or other symbols, usually a dagger. It's very common to have asterisks. The probability expressed with the letter P, or lowercase p, shows if the correlation between two things is meaningful or just coincidence. Like, for example, when the correlation has a 5% or less chance of being random, it is expressed as this, asterisk space P less than 0.05. This means, and no zero before the decimal point. So once again, this means less than 5% chance of being random, which means it's probably correlated. And typical probability notes are this 1 asterisk for 5%, use 2 asterisks for 1% or less, and 3 asterisks would mean 0.1% or less. You're probably going to see a lot of 1 and 2 asterisks. Probably the most common ones you'll see if you have probability notes, but that's just some short discussion on probability notes. What about lines? Well, basically, or horizontal vertical lines. I use horizontal lines sparingly. It doesn't need to look like an Excel spreadsheet. The only required horizontal lines are below the table title. So here's the table title, so this one. Below a spanner title. So here's a spanner title, so this here. Below a column title. So here's a column title. We just continue this whole horizontal line because these are all column titles. So it's just one solid line, so only required below a column title. Above a total or subtotal, which I don't think I have an example of, I do not. No, I do not. Oh well, sorry, but above a total or subtotal, and below the table and before any footnotes. So if I come back to here, so here's the bottom of the table. This last entry here with 4 and 4.5, that's the bottom of the table, and before any footnotes. So those are the, you have all one, two, three. You have all except for the total and subtotal. You have all the situations here of when a horizontal line is required. Avoid vertical lines to separate data. Use spacing and row and column alignment to clarify the data relationship. So what you want to do is that you can easily tell that you don't need vertical lines here because it's quite clear that the spacing and the alignment of the data here, that this data here, this is one set of data. You don't need a vertical line here to separate it, to clarify it. So here the alignment and the spacing have provided it clarifies the data or the relationship of the data. Vertical lines might occur in a large table to improve clarity and comprehension, so they might appear. But basically, just avoid vertical lines. So what about large tables, our last topic? For large tables, when a table is too long or too wide to fit on one page, the best practice is to simplify the table or to create separate tables. So if it's bigger than one page, you should really think about redoing the table so it fits on one page. However, for a table longer than one page, all subsequent pages should repeat the spanner and column titles and have the table number with continued at the top of the page. For example, table 1 continued. So if we come here, so what you need to do is you need to repeat sort of this block of information right here, the spanner titles and the column titles here. That way people know, imagine if you had a bunch of entries that extended onto another page. You want to repeat these column titles so people know what the different column titles are without having to flip back. And then to know that you're still on table 1, you need to have some table 1 continued. For a table wider than one page, use landscape mode. So, not portrait, but landscape, if that's you turn the page sideways. And the table text should read from the bottom to the top of the page. So if you come back here, basically if this table, let's say you had more than one column here and it doesn't fit on what's called portrait style of a page, then you can rotate it to landscape view and you would actually have more room because a piece of paper is 8.5 by 11, so you could probably get a couple more, like 2 more columns in here. Then you turn it sideways. Basically, you'd rotate what you see here counterclockwise one. Rotate it counterclockwise. So this edge here would be at the bottom, and the text runs up the page. If you imagine turning this counterclockwise, and this being at the bottom, that all the text will run up the page. So that's what you want to do. So you want to use landscape with the table text running from the bottom of the page to the top. And if the landscape-oriented table is longer than one page, all subsequent, you should really avoid that situation. If you have something that's in rotated in a landscape orientation and then it goes longer than one page, you should really avoid that. But if it needs to, if you need to have a landscape-oriented page which is longer than one page, then basically it's the same rules as right here. I could have bulleted them out, but I didn't. All subsequent pages need to repeat the span or column titles, and you need to have the table number with the continued at the top of the page. So that's it for this video. If you want to get notifications for the series, please click subscribe. If you like the video, hit like. Check out links to books and videos in the description.